It's great to have Jonathan Karl on the show today, Chief Washington Correspondent for ABC News, author of the book Retribution, Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America. Really appreciate you being here, Jonathan. Thanks.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with a couple of the logistics. I've seen some of the interviews that you've done about the book and I've looked at the book itself as well. There's now a lot of reporters who talk about the I texted Trump or I called Trump sort of thing. I'm trying to understand the dynamics of, is it just kind of known that you call Trump and he might pick up and it's sort of like normal and accepted? Has this been Trump's way of communicating with some of the reporters that he knows for a while? Is it surprising, like, for example, when you called Trump the morning after the election and in a sort of haggard sounding voice, as you described, he picks up and he goes, "Yeah, Jonathan." Is this just normal with Trump in covering him?
It's actually a somewhat new phenomenon. Trump has worked the phones with reporters for a long, long time, but it hasn't been so much Trump himself picking up his cell phone and calling or reporters dialing his cell phone number. I mean, I talked to Trump a lot over the years. I've known him since 1994. During the course of his political life, dating back to call it like, 2013, a couple years before he was running, but when he was obviously out there, I mean, if I wanted to get Trump on the phone, I would call Hope Hicks back then. Before that, if I wanted to get Trump on the phone, I would call a woman named Norma Federer, whose desk was right outside his office in Trump Tower. He was always available, always, and sometimes suddenly your phone would ring and it would be Trump. But at least in my experience, and this might be different for others, it never really occurred to me to directly call Trump's phone. I had his number, and actually, I didn't directly make a call to him until Butler. And keep in mind, that's all of the first presidency. That's all of the stuff that happened after. And what I did, he got the assassination attempt happened. And I called him. That was a Saturday night. We were on live coverage. I called him Monday morning, the morning that the convention was starting, and just left a voicemail saying, kind of like, glad you're okay. Really sorry about what happened. That was horrific. And to my surprise, he called me back. And I talked to him on the first day of his convention, 2 days after assassination, for almost 15 minutes.
Hmm.
We were like getting ready to go on live. He had chosen JD Vance. There was all this stuff going on, and he just kind of wanted to talk. Um, but even then I didn't really abuse that. I didn't really. I mean, it's not normal at all. Let's face it, to like call a presidential nominee or a president on the. It's just not a thing. That actually there's always at least one layer between. Um, the next time we spoke over the phone was towards the end of the summer when he called me after viciously attacking me for this week for our Sunday show on ABC. I had an interview with Tom Cotton, and Trump hated it, and he like suggested he was going to pull out of the ABC debate with Kamala Harris because it was so outrageous, et cetera, et cetera. And I had texted him after that happened to say, hey, I'm glad you watched, but did you see the interview with Bernie Sanders, which I had also had on the same show? It was exactly this. I mean, I didn't treat Cotton any different than I mean, and it wasn't that contentious an interview. I really don't know what got him upset. Anyway, he called me and suddenly it was like we were old friends.
Hmm.
So I started calling him like every couple of days during the campaign. I mean, there would be sometimes where a week or so would go by, but every few days, and he almost always picked up.
What was your sense of what he was doing when he would take these calls?
So learned kind of the rhythm of his day, and I tried to call when I knew that he wasn't obviously in the middle of events. He would take calls on the plane at night,
Hmm.
on his plane. So this is not Air Force One, obviously. This is the campaign. And and I would often talk to him in the morning before things were starting. And so he was, in the morning, I think he's watching a lot of television. There was a call I describe in the book where I call him right after going on Good Morning America. This is the Sunday before the election. It was weekend Good Morning America. and he went off on me. Just usually the calls are not contentious,
Yeah.
but because he hated what I had to say on Good Morning America. I was saying that he wasn't focused. His own people were getting upset that they got a basic message that they want him to reinforce about comparing his record as president to Biden and Harris, and he's going off on these tangents about shooting journalists and all this, and he was very upset with what I had to say. And I said, well, look, you have the weave. You said it's the weave. You are not. He said, well, the weave got me elected president. Um, and so anyway, it's now since he's president, first of all, I don't call him a lot because it's like I still think there's something completely odd about it. But at key moments when I want to know something or I want to say something, I will call him. I called him the last time we spoke over the phone. Uh, last time I called him, he picked up, and he, like I said, even now as president, it's a high percent. As I've told people, it more likely that I would get Trump on the phone when calling him than like the deputy press secretary for the Harris campaign,
Hmm.
or for that matter, the one of the spokespeople for Trump. But I called him right after Charlie Kirk was shot,
Hmm.
and before we knew that Kirk had died. And he picked right up. Said something interesting, by the way. I said, yeah, I was just calling again to say, really sorry what happened. That was horrible. And it was clear by the way he was talking to me. We didn't know that Kirk had died, but Trump knew because he was talking about him to me in the past tense. And he said to me, he actually liked you.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but he actually liked you. So I don't know. But and I called him the morning after the Iran strikes. He picks up. I called him, God, it was like he was about to do a major address. I think it was also in the wake of Iran. Because I talked to him a few times around Iran when he was doing a primetime, address, and I called him like right before, and he picks up the phone. So
Hmm.
like I said, I don't abuse that. But
When it comes to the antagonism, Jonathan, that we see in public, like you've been, his ire has been turned on you a number of times, and
yeah,
we saw one of the things I'm wondering is to what degree it might be an act, and the reason that I ask that, and that doesn't mean he's not sometimes genuinely upset, is even like in her book, Kamala Harris describes how for the
yeah,
hundreds or thousands of times that he mispronounced her name in public,
yeah.
the day after the debate, they see each other and he just kind of says something like, you did great. And then after the election, when she calls him to concede, he pronounces her name correctly and says it's a beautiful name, according to her. And it's sort of like he knew how to pronounce her name all along. How much of the public antagonism of individual members of the media do you think is sort of a show?
I mean, it's a lot. A lot of it's a show. Some of it is absolutely intended. He's gotten genuinely really angry at me, um, because I have not, look, I'm not an opinion journalist. I believe that I've got to treat Democrats the way I treat Republicans, but I'm going to present the facts, and the facts, are often, I wrote the book Betrayal about January 6th and was very blunt about his actions to overturn a Democratic presidential election, really to overturn American democracy and the threat that he posed and how, the lies that were told. I mean, I don't hesitate to say that. I remember one time when he got particularly genuinely angry at me was during COVID, when we learned of all that he had been telling Bob Woodward, which was completely at odds with what he was saying publicly. And I asked him a question on national television right there in the briefing room. Why did you lie to the American people? And why should we trust anything that you have to say now? And I quite intentionally didn't say, why did you lie about COVID?
Hmm.
I was thinking because it had been just such a colossal collection of lies, and he I mean you could see him seething as he started to answer and tell me what a terrible question and what a disgrace I was. And then he abruptly ended the press conference after we went back and forth. So sometimes it is absolutely, and certainly when it's in private, he's actually mad. But usually in private, it's very friendly.
Right.
And I mean, I've had instances where well, I mean, just the other day, he told me I had hate in my heart, and that maybe Pam Bondi would prosecute me. When I said, "What's this hate speech? Do you really think that the Justice Department should be prosecuting hate speech? Some of your allies say hate speech is free speech." He's like, "Well, maybe she'll prosecute you." And then before he is done fully answering the question, he's doing the weave,
Yep.
and he's telling me to he hopes that I take my beautiful wife out to dinner in Washington, D.C. So,
How worried are you about the prosecution stuff? Because I mean, listen, there's clearly a willingness to direct the DOJ to go after political adversaries. People in my space who are not part of a large media conglomerate and presumably would be funding our own legal defenses. I don't think he's necessarily coming after me personally. I hope I'm not on his radar, to be quite frank. But the people in my orbit, we all kind of assume someone is going to get hit with shrapnel who's loosely in our space. I spoke to the Midas Touch guys and Carlos Espina, Aaron Parnas, everybody who's kind of doing what I do. We've seen now that there's been an indictment of a number of people, including a congressional candidate who was at I believe it was a Chicago-based ICE protest. There's a lot of this shrapnel hitting people. You, as someone at a legacy media network, do you have conversations with your colleagues about could the legal system the justice system be pointed at me?
I mean, that's obviously out there in the ether. I can't say that we're sitting around, talking about it. I mean, you basically go about your job and you just know that, as always, you've got to be rock solid in what you say and what you report and make sure
Mm-hmm.
everything is backed up. But we've seen that even frivolous prosecutions or frivolous lawsuits can cause a lot of pain. So even when you've got, I mean, look, he sued the Pulitzer board for giving Pulitzers to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and did so in a very friendly jurisdiction down in Florida, friendly to Trump. And I mean, it's a comical lawsuit, but you have to go through if you're one of the people targeted, and it's costly and it's time consuming.
When it comes to the issue of Trump's health, I asked Jake Tapper about this, and it's particularly relevant based on the book he wrote, but also I'm curious from a reporter's perspective. My impression, and I'm trying to be as objective about it as possible, is that legacy and corporate media seems a lot less interested in conversations about Trump's health than they were about Biden's. And there's a few examples of that. Recently, there's this video from just a couple days ago where he's lined up to meet the Japanese prime minister. And listen, he didn't seem demented, but he seemed
Right.
like he was a little disoriented and kind of not sure where to look, where to go. He's being led around in a similar way as it was alleged Biden was being led around. And it was like kind of a zero story, whereas the Biden examples would get more attention. And so that's like a micro example. And then if I
Yeah.
zoom out a little bit, the whole picture of an MRI that wasn't disclosed. Why is he so regularly taking cognitive tests? His ankles are swollen. His right hand is bruised from shaking hands, but he doesn't shake hands with his left hand, but it's still bruised. There's sort of like questions that it doesn't seem corporate media super eager to look at. Am I seeing something that's not there, or is there something there?
Well, I mean, first of all, a lot of this goes back. This is not a recent development with Trump. Questions
True.
about the state of his health, the state of his mind. This is why he first started talking about the wonderful the test that he asked. Man, woman, person, camera, TV, and he was.
Yeah.
I mean, what was do you remember the incident where he walked to a door to open it and there was no door? Or was it,
I don't
I
remember
mean,
that one,
I
actually.
mean,
That
I mean,
sounds
there's
interesting.
or that time where he walked down the ramp, I think it was at a military event, and it
At
looked like
West Point, yeah, where he
yeah,
was
yeah,
sort of like
yeah,
being gingerly helped down it. Yeah.
yeah. So that's years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think so. One thing, just in general for me, I'm not a doctor. I don't think it's my job to kind of speculate,
Yep.
about the health. I didn't, do a lot of stories about, about Biden's health. That's absolutely true.
Hmm.
I did report, that concerns that were raised about, Democrats about Biden running again, and the wisdom of putting another a candidate up there was as old as he was and appeared more than his age, but also how old he appeared.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's my job to be armchair doctor. So but I think the other part of it is the flood the zone approach with Trump. I mean, there's just so much tonnage. I mean, stories that would dominate for news cycle for a week, come and go in hours. So I think that's also probably a factor in what you're seeing. But look, overall, Trump, I mean, sure, the ankles, the bruising on his hands, and the other stuff you mentioned. He is a very he is just very active, and that whole he projects what he projects authority. Um, it's so I don't know. I'm not going to
Yeah.
speculate on his health, but I think there's been a lot of speculation about his health over the last 10 years, literally. And at some point, the speculation will be true. But if
Right.
we're,
With everybody.
in the long run, we're all dead. So,
Yes. Last sort of general area I want to ask you about. There are some stories right now that are getting attention that I'm unsure what the longer term political impact will be for Trump or the Republican Party, even into the midterms. Like, for
yeah,
example, the demolition and ballroom construction at the White House,
yeah,
the 42 million people that I think, unless something changes, are at risk of losing food stamp benefits on November 1st.
yeah.
The farmers and ranchers that are increasingly, a group that voted very much for Trump and are increasingly furious with him. Do you think that those stories have the potential to be politically impactful as far as elections go, or are they going to be the sorts of things next November nobody will remember?
I think the stories you mentioned all of them have the potential to really break through, especially, depending on where we are economically. I would add a related thing was when Scott Besson was on with my colleague Martha Raddatz, and she was asking about soybean farmers. Now, I guess the Chinese are buying a couple of, buying some soybeans now, and
Yeah.
maybe I don't know where this is all going to stand, but soybean farmers have been suffering, really suffering. And Besson said, you may not know this, Martha, but I am a soybean farmer.
Yeah.
And so I have felt some of this pain. I mean, I know he may own soybean farms. I don't think the billionaire Treasury Secretary is feeling the same pain that an actual soybean farmer is feeling. So these stories, and you could also add the bailout for Argentina, and the deal on Argentine beef. These are these are things that if people are suffering and the president's building a 300+ million ballroom, whoever the hell is paying for it, and also clearly really interested in it and spending so much time and choosing marble and how to do. So it's not just the destruction of the East Wing, but it's also talking about building monuments and building, so I think that these stories can certainly be seized on, by Democrats in the midterms. And my sense is each one of those has broken through. It's fascinating to me how the destruction of the East wing has really broken through. I mean, I can sense it in the reaction to the stories that are out there, just anecdotally, and people I speak to. I'm out there on this book tour now, so I'm talking to a lot of people. People are like we're really horrified and concerned to see a part of the White House, brought down.
It's going to be an interesting 12 months and 5 days, I guess, or something like that. That's for sure. I highly recommend Jonathan Karl's book, Retribution, Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America. Really appreciate your time today.
David, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, and I hope to see you in person soon.